Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. Victor Newman will seek Claire Newman for forgiveness and decide to permit her to have a romantic relationship with Kyle Abbott, but more turmoil is on the horizon, according to the Young and the Restless recap for Thursday, August 21st. Devin Winters will learn all Claire said about Audra Charles and the scheme to ruin her relationship with Kyle when he runs across Nate Hastings in the park. Devin will accept Victor's order and learn about the kiss that was observed between Kyle and Claire at Society. Given that everyone is pointing fingers in different places, Nate will struggle to decide who to believe. Devin will essentially encourage Nate to follow his instincts since he believes Audra to be the least reliable member of the group. Nate will appear scared of the conclusion his intuition will take him to since he will have misgivings about Audra. On Thursday's YNR episode, Victor will appear thoughtful at the ranch as he recalls uncomfortable time spent with Kyle and Claire. Victor will say that it's about Claire and Kyle before leaving to resolve things when Nikki Newman asks him what's wrong. Claire will tell Victoria Newman what transpired when she told Nate the truth about Audra's behavior at the Tack House. Claire will go on a tirade about Audra's deceit and attempt to blame Kyle for everything. Victoria will leave them to talk privately when Victor ultimately arrives and requests to speak with Claire alone. Victor has made his position on Kyle very obvious, so Claire won't see what they have to discuss. This time, though, things will be different. Victor will reassure Claire that his intention has always been to keep her safe, but he will also pledge that he will no longer obstruct her relationship with Kyle. Victor will persuade Claire that he is genuinely backing off, even asking for forgiveness as they embrace, despite her initial skepticism. Kyle will confess to Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins Abbott at Society that he gave Audra one kiss as part of his nice trap. Jack and Diane will believe that telling Claire now is preferable to running the chance of a confrontation later. Kyle will be concerned about how it would appear if Claire discovered that he had been hiding the kiss and will not inflict any more suffering on her. Kyle will not be anticipating that meeting because Victor will ultimately call him and invite him to the property. Since everything has changed, Claire will encourage Kyle to leave as soon as she arrives. Victor's change of heart over her romance with Kyle will make Claire very happy, so she will tell Jack, Diane, Victoria, and Nikki about it as well. Victor will insist that Kyle passed his test when he gets to the property. Although he will continue to observe Kyle, Victor will reassure him that he will not attempt to stop his relationship with Claire. Audra will inform Sally Spectra at Crimson Lights about that witch, Claire, telling Nate all about Victor's scheme and the kiss she gave Kyle. Sally will give Claire some tough love and point out that there was a danger involved in going into that arrangement with Victor, but Audra will act like Claire is a drama queen who is being nasty. Kyle was just a towel away from betraying Claire on the bed in Nice, but Audra still disapproves of him playing the victim. Even though Audra tried to repair the damage and blamed Kyle for everything, Nate continued to sleep on the couch. Nate won't allow Audra to sidestep this conversation or give him more lies since he will finally arrive and meet with her alone. According to teasers for the Young and the Restless, Nate will be prepared for the truth because he will know that Audra is lying to him. Watch to see how she reacts. As a guy, Victor Newman was not used to apologizing or lowering his ego. He had been Genoa City's dominant figure for decades, a patriarch who established an empire based on cunning and fear, and who expected obedience, respect, and allegiance. Even the most powerful man, however, was unable to erase mistakes or put an end to the ghosts of decisions that plagued the family. Following Claire's homecoming and the revelation of her warped childhood with Jordan, Victor found himself looking at the young woman with the eyes of a grandfather who worried he had let one of his own down, rather than a CEO. Claire had been used as a weapon against the people who might have been her family all along, tricked into believing false information about the Newmans, and dragged into activities she had never requested. In his own thoughts, Victor saw through the layers of blame, but the sorrow of her betrayal still persisted in the Newman home, particularly in Nikki's frail heart. It was the brutality of the woman who brought Claire up in darkness, not Claire's fault. As a result, Victor startled himself by offering Claire a hand in reconciliation, not as a sign of strength, but rather as an acknowledgement that she deserved a shot at atonement, a chance at family, and possibly even a chance at love. Since she first arrived in Genoa City, Claire had been suspicious of the Newmans. She wasn't sure if she deserved their forgiveness and was reluctant to accept it. For a short but destructive period, she thought that her peace would come from destroying them even if she had harmed them and planned against them. But as she stood before Victor, he said bluntly, "I forgive you." Claire felt her barriers come down. "I just ask that you pardon me for not being there sooner." It was huge for a man like Victor to own his mistakes. Claire heard not only the words of a strict grandfather but also the desire of a man who yearned to mend the rifts in his family. His deep voice had more weight than any tribunal ruling. Even she was surprised when tears filled her eyes because she had resisted the need for others for so long. Victor was offering her an olive branch, enabling her to imagine a future free from the atrocities of Jordan's control, even though she didn't want to think that he could welcome her after everything she had done. Another complex issue, her relationship with Kyle Abbott, arose during this vulnerable period of fresh starts. Their relationship had come as a surprise, a spark that was ignited by sincere understanding rather than expediency or cunning. Dealing with his own brokenness as a result of his marriage to Summer falling apart and the ongoing demands of being Jack Abbott's son, Kyle had discovered something unique in Claire, someone who didn't expect perfection and who saw past the Abbott name. He could let go of the facade with Claire, and she could feel normal with Kyle instead of the Newman outsider who bore the burden of treachery. Although their romance was brittle and put to the test by social rumors and the wary gazes of both families, it was genuine. And it was expected that Victor would crush it when he found it. One of Genoa City's most persistent rivals, the Newman-Abbott enmity was, after all, a titanic struggle that had destroyed friendships and damaged partnerships. Nobody anticipated Victor's subdued acceptance, though. Given that he had just begged Claire's forgiveness, what sort of guy would he be to deny her the opportunity to pursue her passions? Victor did not make his choice lightly. In the still hours of the night, he struggled with it, pacing his study and gazing out the window at his empire, balancing sympathy and pride. As a youngster, he recalled Kyle racing through the Newman Ranch's hallways during the infrequent quiet times when the Abbotts and Newmans were together. He recalled Kyle's purity before relationships were ruined by economic conflicts. And now, as an adult, Kyle was choose Claire, whom Victor had only recently accepted as a member of his family. He was aware of the danger and the irony. What if she got wounded by Kyle? What if their bond turned into just another weakness for the Abbotts to take advantage of? What if heartbreak undid Claire's fragile healing? Victor took these anxieties with him. Ultimately, though, he made a decision that he had not often made before: trust. With Claire and this tenuous opportunity of peace, he recognized that control would only drive her farther away. He had spent his life navigating, commanding, and manipulating. So he gave in. He gave Claire permission to fall in love and let Kyle into her orbit. In sharp contrast to the emotional storm that had just passed, the only sound that ventured to disturb the calm of the Newman Ranch living room was the peaceful hum of the generator. The typically intimidating set of Victor Newman's shoulders was flattened by a weight far heavier than any corporate takeover. Newman, whose name was synonymous with power, defiance, and an almost elemental force of will, sat reduced. Claire Grace, on the other side of him, looked at him with a deep, tired bewilderment rather than the terror or rage he may have anticipated. Her face was pale and marked by the recent trauma of betrayal and abandonment. The distance that separated them was more than just physical, it was a gap forged by decades of deceit, manipulation, and a brutality that was too deep to comprehend. Victor started talking in this tense quiet. His voice, which was before a tool for intimidation and power, was now naked and raspy with a sincere sadness that was so strange that even he seemed surprised. Victor's request for Claire's forgiveness was not an isolated moment of repentance. It was the decisive, catalytic act that opened the door to a new, unexpected future, the most immediate and significant of which was his implicit sanction and approval of Claire's romantic engagement with his grandson, Kyle Abbott. It is necessary to comprehend the complex relationship between legacy, power, and the late-blooming humanity of a man who had dedicated his life to erecting walls rather than bridges in order to appreciate the enormous importance of this change. Victor's whole life has been an exercise in self-control. His family dynamics, his commercial empire, and even the private lives of those around him were all viewed as chessboard pieces that needed to be moved in order to fit his ambitious plan. This domineering tendency resulted from a profound, enduring, and fatally flawed sense of protection rather than from simple malice. Because of his own traumatic history, he was adamantly convinced that he alone knew what was best for his loved ones and that any tactics, including deceit, compulsion, and destruction, were justified by the ultimate objective of ensuring their safety and the continuation of the Newman legacy. Perhaps one of the most blatant instances of this mindset in action was his masterminding of the whole Claire affair. When Victor learned that Claire was the daughter of his ex-boyfriend Victoria Newman and his estranged son Cole Howard, he perceived a threat rather than a young woman in need of family. A danger to the Newman name, Victoria's stability, and the meticulously crafted story of his family's past. Instead of welcoming her, he decided to neutralize her. Through the manipulation of Claire's delicate mental state and the funding of her therapy, which was intended to distort rather than to heal her, he orchestrated a scheme of stunning cruelty, turning her justifiable desire for connection into a targeted and specific hatred for the Newmans, especially Victoria. As she tried to burn Newman Enterprises to the ground, he guided her hand and became her friend and anonymous donor. Victor was at his most cunning when he devised a plan to guarantee that the threat would vanish on its own while his own hands appeared to be clean. It is nearly hard to exaggerate the psychological violence of this act. A granddaughter became an innocent pawn in a game she was unaware she was playing when he used her loneliness as a weapon against her. It took a profound change in Victor's perspective to be faced with the entire, human cost of his actions, to see the broken lady before him, to see that his protection had produced the very monster he was trying to prevent. The foundation of his identity, the infallibility of his own judgment, had crumbled. Therefore, the apology to Claire was more than just an apology. An abdication took place. It was the willful destruction of his own divine control over his family's history. He was acknowledging that his method, the Newman method of power-based control, had failed miserably when he looked Claire in the eye and took responsibility for his actions without offering an explanation or an explanation. He was admitting that his conception of what was best was essentially, tragically, incorrect. The rarest moment in Victor's lengthy life was his admittance of fallibility, which left a void. The former regulations were no longer in effect. A new paradigm was required if this near apocalypse had resulted under his influence. His position on Kyle became contingent upon this newfound humility. The man who used to view Kyle Abbott as a symbol of the opposing Abbott family, an inappropriate match, and a danger to the integrity of the Newman line, rather than as an individual, was now acting from a point of damaged reflection. How could he possibly assume to know what was best for Claire's heart when he was the one causing her pain? His own judgment had been shown to be poisonous when it came to family and love. Furthermore, Victor's acceptance is further complicated by his relationship with Kyle Abbott. As the son of Jack Abbott, Kyle is no ordinary young man. As the immortal generals in the decades-long battle of attrition waged in living rooms and boardrooms, the Newman-Abbott enmity is the stuff of Genoa City folklore. Years of betrayals, stolen businesses, and stolen loves have woven their anger into a deeply intimate fabric. The Abbotts have always been Victor's ultimate other, the adversary that must be stopped at all costs. In his old world, it would have been treasonous to let his newly recognized granddaughter, a Newman by blood, mix her life with an Abbott's. The very heritage he worked so hard to preserve would be diluted. However, this calculus was also altered by the apologies. Victor had to confront the ridiculousness of these old grievances when he faced Claire. What had he really gained from his lifetime battle with Jack Abbott? Another generation was now caught in a vicious circle of suffering. Kyle stood for something else. Crucially, he wasn't his father. Kyle had proven to be extremely devoted, ethically sound, sometimes, and empathetic. As Claire's identity turned out to be a fabrication created by Victor, he had been there for her as everything fell apart. Victor had been unable to see the lady beneath the trauma, but Kyle did. Victor could see this, in his unusual form of self-awareness. Breaking the cycle meant standing by Kyle. It was a tangible rejection of his own long-standing conflict. It was an admission that his family's future might not be in seclusion and superiority but rather in reunification and integration with erstwhile adversaries. Victor's decision to bless the union was more than just giving Claire what she wanted. It was a deliberate decision to put an end to a battle and pave the way for a new, hybrid legacy that was possibly stronger for its diversity and was a mix of Abbott and Newman. Victor's blessing was crucial to Claire and Kyle. It wasn't a small matter. Whether they wanted to or not, they were in his sphere of influence. Even the strongest tie may have been weakened by his disapproval, which would have cast a persistent shadow over their relationship and been a source of outside pressure and perhaps conflict. Claire, in particular, was in a precarious situation. From the ashes of the identity Victor had destroyed, she was frantically attempting to create a new one. She yearned for acceptance, family, and a sense of belonging. It would have been an ongoing hurt to have that kept from the patriarch of the family she was attempting to join. She was finally able to start healing because of Victor's forgiveness and subsequent assistance. It was the formal acceptance into the family, the indication that, in spite of the terrible start, she was now a respected and acknowledged member of the Newman clan. Kyle saw Victor's endorsement as confirmation of his own moral fiber. It conveyed that Victor viewed him as his own man, deserving of a Newman woman, rather than as Jack's son. For Kyle, who had frequently battled with his position between the two rival families, this was a pivotal time. It enabled him to enter the relationship without representing the Abbott family in a Cold War and to love Claire without the burden of familial strife. It allowed their love story to be a story about two people, not two dynasties, as it should have been. Without the oppressive pressure of outside resistance from the most powerful entity in their universe, the permission allowed them to breathe and allowed their connection to develop organically. In the end, the story of Victor's apology and the ensuing approval of Kyle and Claire's romance is one about the boundaries of authority and the gradual development of a more complex, compassionate kind of love. For Victor Newman, the entire story is a cruel, concluding lesson. At last, he realized that love is not control. The biggest risk arises when that protection is provided by trickery and deceit. Although genuine, his affection for his family had always been contingent on their obedience to his wishes. He was faced with the results of that philosophy, complete destruction, after the Claire revelation. One of his most notable character changes is perhaps his transformation from the mastermind of Claire's suffering to the guy who respectfully begs for her forgiveness before stepping aside to let her fall in love with Kyle. It portrays a man who is nearing the end of his life and is at last discovering how to relate to others for who they are rather than how he would like them to be. After the apology, the picture of Victor by himself in his peaceful living room is a potent one. He is no longer moving the pieces, but the game board remains. For once, he has opted to let the players make their own decisions. Victor was giving them a gift when he gave Kyle her heart and Claire her forgiveness, but he was also offering himself a kind of absolution and an opportunity to leave a new type of legacy. It is a heritage of healing, of love freely chosen, across enemy lines, and of reconciliation rather than of unchallenged strength and solitary glory. Perhaps it is a more subdued legacy, but it offers his family a future free from the long, dark shadow of his own domineering hand. The tragedy of a man who created an empire but almost lost his soul lies at the heart of Victor Newman's story. He started the arduous trip back to find it by pleading for forgiveness and making room for a love that he would have previously banned.